How's Inky? Chapter 2. Kindness brings returns aplenty. We were seated at the breakfast table when word came that on a highway a few miles away a car had hit a doe. A tiny fawn less than a week old had been left alone in the world. Would we take it in, give it protection, and raise it? Would we? Breakfast was forgotten, and we were on our way. Within 2 hours we were back, bearing in our arms our animal treasure, a tiny, spotted, now motherless fawn. Bobette, we named her, in honor of Bobby. Bobette simply took our hearts by storm. Not one of us would ever forget those first moments when we stood looking down at her, feeling awkward and rough before her frailty, and already worried as to whether we could care for her. Her oversized eyes returned our glances without the slightest fear. Her slender legs wobbled and bent. So young was she, Bobby caught hold of her, afraid she would fall. Then she let out a weak, thin little bleat. She must be hungry. Pandemonium broke loose. The three of us jumped and started to run at the same time. One would have thought she would have starved if she was not fed within the next 5 seconds. Bobby bumped into Judge Norton. I bumped into both of them. Bobette was so frightened at the sudden commotion she forgot her hungry and probably wished she hadn't said anything. A baby bottle had been brought out, and Bobby came running with it, filled with milk, cold and straight from a can. That would never do. The milk must be warmed, and it must be diluted with an equal part of water. There was another outburst of ill-directed action, during which Bobby and I collided, spilled the milk, dropped the bottle, but fortunately did not break it, and placed another pan of milk on the stove, but forgot to start the fire. Judge Norton retreated into a corner where he wouldn't be run down, and where he could laugh at our miniature riot. Finally, after what seemed an age, the milk was ready, many times tasted and tested, and Bobette was presented with her first dinner at the sanctuary. She liked it right well, and never stopped until the bottle was drained down to the last drop. Then came the problem of housing our little charge. There were wildcats, bears, and wolves in the wide forests around the sanctuary. Bobette was too young to cope with them. Her woods-wise mother would have known what to do to provide a measure of safety, but that protection had been snatched from her. No pen or cage was available, so we assigned her to a little sleeping cabin which stood a short distance away from our main lodge. We cleared out the furniture, built a fire in the little wood stove to take out dampness and chill, spread some old coats in a corner as a bed, and invited Bobette into her new home. She walked in willingly enough, and promptly fell flat. She wasn't hurt in the least, but certainly looked embarrassed. Her chin and stomach were flat on the floor, and her legs spread to indicate the 4 points of the compass. "Get up, Bobette. You look like a rug," said Bobby as he hurried to help her. Bobette simply could not stand up on the floor. It had been oiled, and her little hoofs could not grip the slippery boards. We stood her outside among the balsam trees while we rushed about the sanctuary, assembling some fiber rugs for Bobette's boudoir. When she was invited in once more, this time entering with more success and certainly more dignity, we gave a shout of triumph as she confidently walked across the floor and promptly curled up on the bed prepared for her. Where is all the smoothness and calm you were talking about?" Judge Norton asked later. At the moment, we couldn't remember such a condition. But we soon learned we were only beginning our new hectic experience. Bobette was problem number 1. There were more coming. Suddenly, the world seemed to have broken out with an epidemic of sending us orphaned baby animals to raise. Not many hours had passed when a tiny groundhog or woodchuck was brought to us. It was so young its eyes had not opened as yet. The only one in the family of 8 to survive a tragedy, we were told by the person who brought it to us. Would we take it in, protect it, and raise it? Oh, would we? Bobby insisted this creature was to be his special pal, and that proved to be true. But what to name it? One suggested Woody, another suggested Chuck, but neither met with much enthusiasm. Finally, Judge Norton struck the right ideal. "What do you generally call groundhog?" he asked with meaning. And thereupon we named it Sausage. We padded up a box as a nest for her and moved her in beside Bobette. Our family was growing, and so were our worries. 2 days later, from another source, came two little raccoons. Everyone should look upon a baby raccoon. I don't believe there would be a spark of cruelty or meanness left if this were done. The words cute and adorable are much overworked, but they should be in the human language if for no other reason than to describe those funny, furry little fellows. Like Sausage, the baby raccoons had not yet opened their eyes when they arrived at the sanctuary, and they too were the only ones of their family to survive a tragedy. Would we take them in, protect them, and raise them? Yes, we would. We now unwittingly had opened an orphanage, and it might as well be full. We padded up another box for the latest comers, named them Rack and Ruin, and moved them in with Bobette and Sausage. The names Rack and Ruin proved to be most appropriate as time went on. Now let it be known that each new arrival brought with it as much excitement and confusion as had Bobette, and each one brought its own problems and complications. When, how, and what to feed the baby animals, and the many other cares that came up every hour of the day and at night, in their behalf kept us in a whirl of bewilderment. Judge Norton pretended to be much disgusted with Bobby and me because of the way we fussed and worried over our charges. Yet, in the middle of one night, when Bobby awakened and slipped down to see if the animals were all right, he found the judge sitting up with them. When I slipped down to inspect things and found them both there, just as we seemed to have caught the hang of things and began to feel that we were masters of the situation, the most unsettling event of all took place. Inky the porcupine arrived. It was the same old story. Through a tragedy, Inky had been left motherless. Would we take him in and protect him and raise him? Would we? One look at that funny little fellow and he was ours and we were his. He was black as ink, hence his name, and about the size of a baseball with a tail on it. His eyes were like shoe buttons. Though only 3 days old, he was bristling with those aggravating needle-like quills, and was amazingly strong and independent. Immediately he climbed up my arm under his own power, settled on my shoulder, and began chewing on my ear, a habit he has retained ever since. Inky moved into the orphanage. He was assigned a box, but he would have nothing to do with it. From the very start, he was provokingly independent. While he liked us, he let us know he could do without us easily. He made an inspection tour of his new home, looked over the other animals, and decided he was superior to everything he found. He pawed Rack and Ruin to see if they were alive, bit Sausage to hear her squeal, and with a quick move fastened a quill in Bobette's nose when she tried to be friendly. When he waddled across the floor, tucked his head in a corner, and went to sleep. The evening following Inky's arrival, after the 5 little fellows had been fed and put in their respective nests, we slipped up to their cabin, flashlight in hand, to have another look at them. We shall never forget the picture we saw. They all were assembled on Bobette's bed, snuggling, cuddled against her warm body, sound asleep. How Rack, Ruin, and Sausage got out of their nests it was hard to conceive, but somehow, in their yearning for mothers who were no more, they had sought until they found this comfort and care. Inky, too, had left his cold, cheerless corner and forgotten his assumed superiority, joined the little furry cluster, and Bobette, the tiny baby that she was, seriously assumed her role as foster mother. As we came in, she looked up at us with something of a pride on her face. Then, even as we watched her, she licked first Rack, then Ruin, then Sausage, and started to lick Inky, but changed her mind at first contact with his quills. We were deeply moved by what we had seen. As we came back to our main lodge, Judge Norton spoke. "Now, doesn't that repay you 100 times for all the trouble you've had?" It did, we agreed. "I'm not sure how much we are doing for them," added Bobby, "but I know what they are doing for me. It is the first time I have realized that kindness is something you do for yourself, Boy, I feel good inside. As the judge was preparing for bed, we heard him improvise another verse for his favorite song. The mistakes in English can be forgiven in the light of the truth of his message. Oh, a man can learn to figure, he can learn to read and write, and he can learn just how to play and work with all his might. Yeah, he can learn a lot of things and feel quite proud, you bet. But till he knows how to be kind, he don't know nothing yet.